Okay, this is Sarah Graves. I'm the chair, the current chair, outgoing chair, in just a few minutes, of the GCOOS board. And welcome to our members meeting. We are having a great turnout. It looks like around 65. So that is fantastic. And appreciate you all taking the time to log into this virtual meeting. We hope we'll be face to face in not too many more months, but who knows? So just a big welcome from all of us on the board to all of you in the member community. I think in terms of roll call, so to speak, Chris has been checking, and which is easier to do, I guess, on the virtual world. So we won't have a roll call as such. Introductions, I wanted to mention that we have two new board members. One is Dr. Kim Yates, who is with USGS in St. Petersburg, and the other is Dr. Antonetta Quick, who's with the Texas A&M Galveston campus. And Antonetta, are you online to sort of introduce yourself a little more?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a fabulous day and enjoying the cool change that we're experiencing. I know I am. I'm really excited to be a member of the board. I am currently serving as the Senior Associate Vice President for Research and Graduate Studies at Texas A&M in Galveston. I bring to the board several decades of experience working in the Gulf of Mexico on a variety of environmental issues. I'm trained both as a oceanographer and as a hard science bench chemist, and I enjoy doing both kinds of work as well as working with a cross-section of the community, whether it's in science or social studies or educating the next generation. Thank you for including me on the board, and I look forward to serving.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Kim Yates was unable to be with us today, so she was involved in a proposal review for NOAA. Wanted to also thank very much Dr. Ed Kearns, who rotated off the board. He is with NOAA, and also Dr. Nancy Rabelais, and we will be talking a little bit more with Nancy in a few minutes. So I think I'm supposed to give a quote safety moment. So hopefully you're looking around wherever you are and you're safe and sound. I am actually down on the coast in Orange Beach, Alabama, because we had to come down and see what was happening with our condo. And so I say Lou and some other people who probably have been affected by the latest hurricane, Sally, and many of you who have been affected by others. But anyway, hopefully you're all safe and sound today. Also wanting to take this opportunity to introduce our new executive committee members. Mr. Joe Swakos will be taking over as chair of the GCOOS board in a very few minutes. The chair-elect is Steve Duchesne from Texas. The secretary is Kirsten Larson from Mississippi. The treasurer is John Von Smeering, who is from Texas. Also on the executive committee as the past chair, I will be continuing for next year. Bill Lynch, who has been on the executive committee for many years, and he will be rotating off because he has been the past chair for the last 2 years. So many thanks to Bill. He will be continuing with us in different capacities. And of course, many thanks to Bill for the strategic planning, leading that exercise over the last couple of years. I think that's all of the members that I need to be introducing. I think my next action is to quote, hand the gavel. So Joe Swakos, I'm handing you the gavel of the chair of GCOOS. But before I do that, I want to tell you all as board members and members how wonderful it has been to get to know many of you and look forward to continuing to do that. But it has been a huge compliment and that I was chosen to serve as the chair of GCOOS, and very much appreciated all of the support and efforts. Barb and her staff have just been amazing, and I've gotten to know the staff more because I get to sit in on the staff calls sometimes, and that's been very helpful. Many, many thanks to board members. It has been great to work with you, and I look forward to continuing it. That's what sort of makes everything work, is the passion and the interest of board members, and many thanks to you GCOOS members, and we very much appreciate your involvement with GCOOS. We all have a great affinity for the Gulf of Mexico and everything that's happening here. So Barb, I may have forgotten something, but if I didn't, I would like to turn over the chair to Joe Swakos. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
And thanks for your great leadership last several years. We really appreciate it, and I'm glad that you'll be able to stay with us as the past chair on the executive committee. I want to go ahead and convene the meeting, and I'm going to do something a little different that we've kind of gotten away from, and that's try to put a little bit more formality into the meetings themselves. Nothing drastic. I mean, I'm not draconian, but I do think we need to be a little bit more formal in what we do and how we do it. So I want to formally convene the meeting, and I would like to propose that we adopt the tentative agenda. And in so doing, I would like to have a motion that we adopt the tentative agenda.
So moved.
My last second.
Okay. Any discussions? Any problems with the agenda as it now stands? Okay. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, great. So we've formally adopted the agenda. Just by way of information, a little bit of my background. I've been with GCOOS now for probably 15 years. I started back with the Education and Outreach Council. My first meeting was back in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, when Sharon Walker, Dr. Sharon Walker, was chairing then the EOC. We had some distinguished members at that meeting, many of whom have rolled off the GCOOS board, but still are active in their particular fields. I remember the first meeting with Sharon. I believe Chris Simonella was there. Let's see, as I said, Dr. Sharon Walker, Dr. Mike Springer, and of course, Dr. Nancy Rabelais. And Nancy is enjoying or experiencing her last board of directors meeting today. Nancy is a world-class scientist. She's internationally renowned in what she does, and she's been a very active and contributes greatly to GCOOS in all senses of the word. She's been there through every year, all the time I've been associated with GCOOS, and I would like to personally thank Nancy for all she's done and wish her all the best as she moves on. And hopefully the jinx of GCOOS as it pertains to Nancy's health will now end, and she'll get out of her brace, get out of her chair, and be up and jogging and swimming and whatever else in the near future. So Nancy, on behalf of the board, I really appreciate all you've done, and I thank you sincerely for your dedicated efforts. And I'd like to open it up to anyone now who's got something they'd like to say to Nancy. Can be funny, can be serious, can do whatever. Please go ahead and participate.
They're stunned.
This is Chris. Nancy, I think you're my hero and mentor, and I'm going to miss you greatly, but just because you're not on the GCOOS board doesn't mean I don't know where to find you.
Right. I know you do. Thanks, Chris. I see some very old pictures up here. Oh, there's Matt.
This is Eric, and I remember a diving trip that I went on with Nancy after a SAML meeting in the Keys, and last year at surf, she made a point of putting one of my staff members' presentations on a hypoxic event into her special session. I just really appreciate your pioneering work on all things in the Gulf, hypoxia in particular. So thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
This is Stephen Howden. Nancy's been a real leader in Gulf of Mexico science, and she's been a real leader on the board. She's made many contributions to GCOOS. She was, a real leader in the build-out plan, and I hope she is able to stay involved just as a regular member.
Thanks, Stefan.
Hey, this is Sarah Graves, and Nancy, GCOOS is Nancy is GCOOS as long as I've been involved. You've certainly been a leader in this area, and we very much appreciate, and I think you're the only MacArthur winner that I've ever known personally. So yeah, kudos to you for all that you do for the community and for the scientific enterprise.
Thanks. I go all the way back to Arley House and Dave Martin, and maybe a meeting or two before that. So I've been involved not just with GCOOS, but with observing systems and the development of IUs and GCOOS for quite some time. And it's, I'm not sure how I'm going to spend all my free time, except go to Zoom meetings. Thank you all so much.
Well,
We're
again,
gonna miss you, Nancy.
Thanks, Barb.
And Nancy, Bill Lynch, just thank you for taking the lead in one of the focus areas on the strategic plan on the healthy ecosystems. Thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
I think, hey, Joe, I think everybody should sort of unmute and give Nancy a hand at the end.
Can
sounds
we
like
ask
a good idea, Bill.
can we ask her one parting question? So this is a
Go ahead.
15-year ongoing question. Are you wearing the same thing that we always wear in the picture?
No, I actually got something that's a little bit warmer out today.
We don't get our group board picture today. Sorry about that.
I guess we'll have to do a screenshot, huh, Chris?
We will. When
Mhm.
everybody goes off mute and applauds, we'll get a screen grab.
Thanks,
Okay,
Eric.
ready?
Okay, everybody ready?
1, 2, 3. Thank you, Nancy.
Yay!
Oh, and I am looking forward to the next in-person hug with any of you that I see in our non-COVID future.
Amen. Okay. Thank you again, Nancy, for everything. And I also want to echo something that Sarah just mentioned, also rotating off the XCOM, Bill Lynch. And Bill's done a lot of good, hard grunt work trying to get us back on track administratively. I mean, we have involved in the build out plan, the strategic plan, and the all the work that we put into the just the functionality of GCOOS in general. It was way overdue. It was very much needed, and like I said, there was a lot of just grunt work that had to be done. And again, Bill, thank you so much, and we appreciate it. And I'm really glad that we'll still be associated with you.
Thank you, Joe. Couldn't work with a better group of people, so it was awesome.
All right, then I would say that we're ready to go to the next event, if you will. Barb is going to present her executive director's report. So Barb, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Joe. And of course, as things happen in this crazy COVID world, our yard service just appeared on our property. So hopefully you won't hear lawnmowers and blowers, but that's what that is. Okay, that's not the right slide. Here we go. Oh dear, we had it. How am I doing, Jen? Can you see it?
I don't think you're sharing.
I can't see it yet.
Oh, hang on. We did it 10 minutes ago, you know?
I think, Jen, you have to ask her, right? Or
Yep, she's
Okay. Okay. And then I have Bill slide up. There we go. How about now?
now we see.
Yes, you got it.
Now we're seeing the preview again, huh, Jen?
Yeah, so if you X out of the go to, well, you can minimize that, yep, and then go up to
Not,
display.
yep. Hang on. Display settings, and which one did we do? Swap?
Nope, duplicate slide. There we go.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. Like I say, we did a test 10 minutes ago, but yeah, we're all in that world of multiple platforms and so on. So I'm going to share what we've been working on in GCOOS the last about 6 months since we last met in April. And again, I have the pleasure of being the executive director for GCOOS, but I think as I give the brief, you'll find that we have a remarkable team of folks that are on the call and work with me every day to make GCOOS what it is. So with that, again, just want to review if people are new to GCOOS. I'm hoping we have a few new folks, and here is our mission. Again, we want to provide on-demand information that's accurate, reliable, and benefits people, ecosystems, and the economy of the 5 Gulf of Mexico states. And I want to take time out now to thank all our data providers. The ocean observing is not by any means for the faint of heart under usual conditions. And these last 6 months have been anything but usual. People have been dealing with COVID travel restrictions, just the mess of COVID stress, dealing with work and home, and children working or going to school at home, and all the challenges that leads to. And then, of course, especially as we sit in Gulf of Mexico, we can't forget that we are up to, so far, 23 named storms of this season. I did have to look it up and just remind everybody, for some reason, Atlantic storms don't use QU, X, Y, or Z. And so that's why we're into, the last storm was Beta, even though we're only at 23 named storms. And, you know, I hate to remind everybody, but we're just through the end of September. So we've got a fair amount of hurricane season. So thank you so much for struggling with all the challenges you've had, and yet providing an awesome data stream for us to serve to the public. People always want to know how we spend our money. And in year 5, again, how the IUCE proposal process worked is 5 years ago, we wrote at a budget of $4 million per year maximum. This year, we received $3.3 million a year. And I'm trying to move this so I can see better. And this is how the breakdown occur, how we shared, trying to move this, how we split the money up. So to support the regional association, that's myself, the staff, the data management team, the data products team. In the past, it's been, of course, travel for the board to travel to 2 board meetings a year, excuse me, is about 20% of our budget. About 46% of the budget is going out to our local data providers for those data observations. And then this year we had about a 34% piece of the pie in special projects. And probably next year going, what were the special projects, Barb? Oops, oh dear, I just almost left the meeting. Yeah. So, before I go into what the special projects were, this is how we apportion the money by the Gulf of Mexico states currently. 5 PIs in Texas, 3 in Louisiana, 1 in Alabama, 1 in Mississippi, and 6 in Florida. All right, so getting back to those special awards or those special projects, we received about $400,000 from the IU's office in, again, this Fill the Gaps campaign that we've been running the last few years, which has been very successful in increasing the IU's budget. And that money particular went to gliders and went to our 4 glider operators in the Gulf, which is Texas A&M University, University of Southern Mississippi, University of South Florida, and Mote Marine Laboratory. $150K went in from the Fill the Gaps campaign for O&M for the Texas radars. We received $85,000 in Fill the Gaps money. As you may remember from the last meeting, we are in the process of becoming the data stewards for the ADCPs that are on the oil and gas platforms in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's a fairly heavy lift to take over that data set. And so we received money for that. $100,000 per year for a glider C-Note coordinator, which is Bill Lynch. You'll be hearing from him later this afternoon. $200,000 for a project called Citation. It is an acronym, but I didn't bother to write it out because it's a very lengthy acronym. But you all might remember that several years ago, Philemon Guyano had a marine mammal health map project to create the architecture of what a marine mammal health, I guess database is the best description, would look like. That project has now been funded through Restore funding, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. $183,000 specifically for the HabScope project. I'll talk about that a little bit later. We received $16,500. This is the Matt Howard Biology Project that the IU's program office has been funding each RA for the last few years in Matt's memory. And then we received $20,000 from the Ocean Acidification Program for the coordination that Jen does on the Gulf of Mexico Coastal Acidification Network. But that IUS is just one of the many synergistic projects that I felt you needed to know the other things that we're working on. So these are the ongoing projects we have within GCOOS. The Grid C project, which is the data management project for all the GOMRI projects. Jim Jabot is the lead PI there, and Frankie Chu and Marion Stossel are the GCOOS staff that participate on that project. The Marine Biological Observing Network, the PI there is Frank Mueller-Carter at USF, and that is funded through NOP, and Marion, Bob Courier, and Chris are working on that. The Loop Current Data Compilation Project, funded by the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine Gulf Research Program, and I know you can read the names yourself, but several of us are working on that project together. The Stones Mooring, Chris has an outreach project to bring the incredible wealth of information that mooring site is providing to outreach products. As I talked about, the NTL is the Notice to Lessees. If people are not familiar with that particular acronym, again, the ADCP Data Stewardship Project, Philemon has been the lead on that, and it's been funded by IUS. We also are now hosting BOEM data because it's publicly funded data. They also want to put it out and available, so we're hosting several sets of BOEM data, and Marion and Philemon have been primary on that. We have a nutrient sensor pilot program with Beth Stouffer at University of Louisiana Lafayette. That project, Jen and myself and Philemon will eventually be involved in it. That project, as you might guess, has been sort of put on hold because of COVID and travel restrictions. The idea is that we will put these nutrient sensors across the Gulf of Mexico at GCOOS partners and have them test them out and how they do in our Gulf of Mexico waters. But again, it's kind of on hold right now. Gandalf is our glider piloting tool that I think Bill Lynch will hit on just a little bit later. But Bob Courier has been very busy this summer on Gandalf with the number of gliders that we have had deployed. And then Shin Kobara maintains and continues to enhance our citizen science data portal. So if that's not enough for you, you think, oh, that's a lot of projects. We also have a half dozen new projects. HALO is the harmful algae monitoring of Lake Okeechobee. I got it pretty close. Jordan Beckler from FAU is the lead PI. It is funded by Florida DEP. The main goal there is to outfit Lake Okeechobee with a pretty impressive suite of sensors. It's been a hot spot in Florida for many years about nutrient concerns, and Bob Courier is the one who has the data management piece for that project. Every Beach, Every Day and HabScope, I'm the PI. I'll talk about it in a minute a little more, but both Bob Courier and Grant Craig are working on that with me. Again, I talked about cetacean, the Marine Mammal Health Map project. You can see the PIs there from NOAA and NERDA, but it's a brand new project. It is a co-project with Socorro and Axiom Data Services. And I'm happy to say that Stephanie Watson, for those of you who have known Stephanie for a lot of years, I'm happy to say Stephanie's back on staff with us part-time, and she will be doing the stakeholder engagement piece for cetacean. The Coastal Project is an interesting project here in Florida. Casey Streeter is a commercial fisherman that got frustrated during the red tide bloom of 2017-18 and said, what can we as commercial fishermen do to monitor water quality better? Chris Kelbel and Mandy from NOAA are the leads on this project, and GCOOS just recently got involved helping with the data management. So the idea is that the commercial fishermen have sondes that they will be taking out on their boats with them, collecting data, beaming it back to the coastal website that you see there on their screen. They can see in pretty close to real time, thanks to Bob Courier's talent, what's going on out there in the water. And of course, from our point of view, we're engaging a whole new stakeholder group that we're excited to be working with. Stephen Howden just received an IUCE OTT grant on an unmanned system for hypoxia monitoring, and we will be doing the data management for his project. Congratulations, Stephen. And finally, last but not least, Lisa Krimsky, University of Florida Sea Grant. received a Red Tide Communication Strategy project, and I'm happy to say Chris Simonello will be working on that project with Lisa. So we stay pretty busy at GCOOS with all these projects. I want to take just a minute, if I may, to talk a little bit more about the Every Beach Every Day Forecast project for a couple reasons. One is that it's funding both by NCOS, National Center for Coastal Ocean Science, the MERHAB program, and IUS received $1 million in pilot projects this year for HAB operations. One of the issues in harmful algal bloom funding is that there have been research dollars, but there haven't been operational HAB dollars. And so a lot of things slip through the cracks. A very successful research project, but then hasn't been funded further to keep things in the water. Our partners on that are Rick Stumpf at NOAA, Kate Hubbard at FWRI, and Tony Reisinger from Texas Sea Grant. And again, the whole idea of this is that by having this new citizen science tool called HabScope, citizens take video of water samples, and then thanks to the image analysis software that Bob Courier has developed, it automatically counts the cells in the water sample, or in the water video, actually. And this is a huge leap forward compared to needing traditionally trained taxonomists to count cells. The project started as a NASA grant. Now we've moved into NOAA and IUS funding. And one of the things we identified under NASA was that we needed a strong volunteer coordinator to help with good quality citizen science sampling. And so Grant Craig is our volunteer coordinator. And the other piece I want to add is that the goal here is that this will transition to a sustained forecast product published by GCOOS in 3 years. So we will be providing the harmful algal bloom forecast for the Gulf of Mexico to replace the current HAB bulletin. And a few pictures, if you haven't seen any of this, again, on the upper left is a picture of the HabScope. It's a over-the-counter microscope, a 3D adapted printer, and an iPod that takes the video. The video beams up to GCOOS, goes through Bob Courier's image analysis software, does a count, and then on the lower section of the slide is the forecast. And you can see how variable, this is on the same day, how variable beach to beach impacts are. And so the idea is that we don't keep people off our beaches during red tide, but that we let them know what beach is best to go to at any particular time of the day. Okay, some of you are wondering about the next 5-year proposal. We have a deadline of December 31st of this year to write for the next 5 years. We will be writing in 2 funding tiers, $3 million a year and $6 million a year. We had a call for proposals in June. Submission deadline was in July. Thank you very much to the executive committee and some of the board members who reviewed all those proposals, ranked them, evaluated them, etc. 25 proposals were selected to be part of the $3 million tier and 29 proposals at the $6 million tier. And Chris asked me to remind those subaward folks that paperwork is due, and I should have put a sound effect in Friday the 13th of November. Staffing updates. You may remember that our data manager vacated in March of 2020. We've taken a little bit of time to assess what the best thing to do for GCOOS data management is. And I'm happy to announce today that effective today, Bob Courier and Philemon Gaiano will be co-chairs of the GCOOS data management team. These guys have been keeping us not only afloat, but at the top of the game for the last 2.5 years since we lost Matt Howard. And we have every confidence in them moving forward that they will continue to do that. We did acknowledge that we had one gap that we needed a little help with, which is in oceanography expertise. So again, I'm happy to announce that Dr. Carrie Wilden from Texas A&M GERG will be joining our team part-time to help us with those oceanography questions, challenges. So welcome, Carrie. We're really excited to have you on board as our team. And finally, staffing updates, just Jen Reland is now working part-time for us. And this is a good thing because Jen has just entered the PhD program at USF with Mark Luther as her advisor. So congratulations to you, Jen. I know you'll do great.
Thanks, Barb.
Okay, you're welcome. Philemon provided this slide about our data portal, so you can just see again the amount of data that we are processing through the data portal. The total number of sensors we're at are pretty close to 1,600 sensors, and you can see the data counts are pretty doggone impressive. And thank you for that, Philemon. Communication snapshot. This is from Nadine Slimek, our communications contractor, and I just want to point out some awesome statistics here. Since last year, we've added 190 new subscribers to our monthly newsletter, but this one is really a kicker. A 35% open rate, and you notice her comment, that's 20% higher than the industry average. So not only are people getting their newsletter in their inbox, they're actually opening it and reading it. And you notice our click rate, again, significantly higher than the industry average. And so then the total number of emails sent, 25,000 different emails out to people. On our website, I just want you to compare where we were June of 2019 compared to 2020. Again, about another 1,000 site sessions. So we continue to grow. And oops, okay, I thought I did our Facebook. Our Facebook, we also continue to grow our social media presence. And again, what we see is a lot of variability on pickup depending on what the topic is. And this is just some Facebook reach at a glance. You can see where we got really popular stories or stories of interest, hurricanes, the red tide forecast, and webinars are some of our more popular ones. I encourage you, if you're not connected to GCOOS on social media, please do so. Okay, and then from Chris Simonello, our outreach and education subsystem. Chris has been working a lot in collaboration with GOMA on the Education and Engagement Steering Committee. The huge campaign, Embrace the Gulf, which we were really looking forward to a celebration of the Gulf in June of this year, which of course got canceled. And the other awesome activity, Paddle the Gulf. They have an awesome website if you haven't seen it. encouraging people to get out there and enjoy nature. And probably, you know, during these COVID times, that might be of more interest now than it actually was to people a year ago. Chris has been working hard with our Gulf of Mexico regional collaboration team on a video project that we've coined the new normal. The concepts of this were scripted or identified by the Outreach and Education Committee of GCOOS Council. And we thank Brian Lamar, Kristen Larson, Matt Bethel, and Kristen Cusack from USF, who have really spearheaded this. They're close to having closure on these video projects, and our outreach and education folks, if you're out there listening, we will be beta testing it with you probably October of this year, soon. And as I alluded to before, Chris is also working on the Stones Mid-Ocean Observatory. It's an amazing deep water platform, and she's working to bring those data products out to people. And if you didn't catch it, last month we had a webinar by Bradley Hubbard from Shell about emergency preparedness in the industry. That webinar is available on our GCOOS channel if you're interested in viewing it at a later time. And then Chris has been working hard with the Marine Biodiversity Observing Network team to transition some of the data dashboard and infographics that have been developed at USF into products for GCOOS and IUS. She helped a lot for Capitol Hill Oceans Week in June, which of course went virtual. She's part of the project team for Project Ocean Watch. And we just had a recent webinar last week with Dan Otis from USF, who's part of the MBOD project, about the dashboard that he's developed. Once again, it's on our YouTube channel if you missed it. Okay, slide from Jen Vreeland again, who manages our Coastal Acidification Network project. You can see she's hosted several webinars. Again, you're gonna get tired of me saying on our YouTube channel if you missed it. Has been on several proposal collaborations and LOIs. We haven't hit funding yet, but we'll keep working at it. She's currently working on a ocean acidification state of the science project in the Gulf of Mexico, and you can see those folks who are participating in that project. And overall, working on updating the website, getting a little more structure to her committee and committees. And thanks for all the work that you do on that, Jen. And so I think my last slide is, like Sarah commented on, fingers crossed, we hope dearly we can be together spring of 2021 for our board meeting in person. We have tentative dates of April 14 to 16. We will go to New Orleans if we are all able to travel, and you can bet that we'll have some special surprises and celebrations if we are able to be in person together. And I have been in contact with Michelle Heipel, who's the director for the Australian IUS. And again, if she is able to travel, she will be joining us in New Orleans. So maybe jot those dates down as a placeholder, and we hope that things will come together. And with that, I think I'll take any questions or comments. And thank you for your time. Thank you for the support of GCOOS. And again, I want to thank our incredible staff and our incredible board of directors.
Thank you, Barb. That's a great brief. It's an incredible amount of work that you all are doing, and with the size of the staff and the progress and the accomplishments that you've attained, it's remarkable. Thanks. I'd like to thank Bob and Philemon for stepping up and taking over for the co-chairing the data management activities. That's huge, as you can see through the briefings on all the projects. So a lot of this stuff is laden with data management, and these two guys can do a miraculous amount of stuff. Welcome to Dr. Carrie Wilden. Glad to have you on board. It's nice to have you helping us in the world of oceanography. Also, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Watson back to the fold. Stephanie's been on again, off again, involved with GCOOS, and she's a tremendously talented young lady, and she brings a lot to the table. We're really lucky to have her back. Also, best wishes to Jen as she pursues the doctorate. That's something that she's been kind of, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, can I, am I good enough? And finally, it's all worked out, and so she's on her way, and we wish her all the best. Barb, I do have one question, and we all know, I mean, this hurricane season's been ridiculous, from Texas all the way to Florida. How are activities like Dauphin Island Sea Lab functioning? Are they still in existence, or did they get destroyed? And what, have you heard anything? We have a number of education and outreach folks in the Pensacola, Navarre Beach area. Have we heard anything about them? Is there anything we can do to help them?
Thanks, Joe. I think Renee, you're on. I'm not sure if Brian DZ or Lehu are on. Would anybody like to give a report from up there? Come on, Renee, I've never known you to be shy.
Hey,
Just having audio problems.
Renee seemed to be having trouble hearing you, so she might not hear you. I have been in contact with DZ, and not live yet, but they weren't totally locked out.
Renee, you're really breaking up, Renee.
I think Leo is on the call as well.
Renee's gonna call in. She's calling in.
If you turn her video off, it might be better.
Yeah.
I'm talking right now. Can y'all not hear me?
This is Sarah Graves, and I will wait and see what Dauphin Island and Renee say, but just being in Orange Beach and having to sort of drive around for various things, there's a lot of damage in Gulf Shores, Orange Beach, and in South Alabama for sure.
Yeah.
Sarah, you sent out some pictures of the lab. It looked pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was horribly frustrating. So for the Sea Lab, I was saying I had an office there up until Sally hit, and I was saying I had an office because there's no longer a roof or a ceiling or anything over it. I have some pictures I can send later when technology is not being so awful. But there are 3 buildings that lost major portions or all of their roofs. The apartments where the graduate students could live on campus, they've all been evacuated out of that, and there's nothing, like several grad students lost everything they owned. And then the maintenance department lost a big chunk of their roof. And then the part of the building where my office is, which is actually above the marine observing portion of the, like where all that work is done, that roof got ripped off. So fortunately, the downstairs where a lot of the equipment and stuff is housed seemed to do okay. Then they did lose a couple stations at least in that group. And then Lehu's office is actually, it got impacted. It's in that same area where mine is or was. And so when I went by there, she had already seemed to have gotten all her stuff out as well. So I don't know what the long-term plan is. The C Lab's always managed to bounce back from disasters better than when they started. So, and John's savvy, so I think that in the end it'll be okay. But in the short term, I think some people are working at South. It's just a matter of logistics to get office space. And then I've already been in contact with the technicians running the node there, and their 3 stations are up and running, and we're working on getting some more up right now.
Thanks,
Chris,
Renee.
I don't know if Chris is on the line or not. Have you heard anything from the teachers over in Pensacola area?
I have. Shin and I and Grant actually had a call with Charlene Morrow, the Navarre Beach folks. They're actually gathering data, working on the BWET grant. They're doing fine. Christopher Lindy, they're doing well also. Some of the Louisiana Sea Grant folks, Matt Bethel, I know they were making trips down to the coast. They were having a lot of issues. People lost everything. Their Sea Grant colleagues, so they're struggling a little bit. But as far as the council members, I would say Lay Hugh is the hardest hit in that regard. And Renee, we're thinking about you. If there's anything we can do, let us know.
So
thanks, Chris. And I see Lay's here too.
Lihu, she wrote a comment that I was going to read off. So Lihu from Dolphin Island, Sea Lab, 3 of her stations had reported data. The Bon Secure, the Mere Park, and Middle Bay Light. These stations were actually reporting real-time data during the storm. Our other 4 stations are down.
And then I will add, I've laid eyes on 2 of those stations, and one of them was attached to a little building that collapsed, so that one will be a while. And then the other one was there, but it had a hard lean. So we'll see what happens with that station. And then I've actually been over into Baldwin County, Escambia, and Santa Rosa County doing some cleanup. Santa Rosa County didn't have as much wind damage, but they had a lot of flood damage. And then Baldwin and Escambia had a lot of either combo and like major wind impacts even farther in. So like Weeks Bay near, we've been working with them and doing some cleanup and stuff. And so we're getting back. I think we haven't had a serious storm in a while, so there were a lot of trees to come down.
Yeah, if I could add, our Kodar station at Gulf State Park suffered some damage, and it may take us a little while to get that back up and running.
Okay, any comments or questions for Barb, getting back to her overview briefing? Okay, if not, Barb, thanks a lot. It was a very good briefing. Thanks to you and the staff. And again, congratulations on all you're accomplishing. It's very impressive.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, next agenda item. We're looking at the Gulf Research Program Data Compilation Project panel discussion. And Jan Van Smeren, I've asked Jan to introduce the panel, and I can turn it over to you, Jan.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen now, and hopefully, okay, yeah, thank you very much, Joe. Yeah, we've undertaken this project, which we've abbreviated down to Gulf Hub. Today, I'm going to give you try and keep it down to about a 10-minute introduction to what we've done in that project. In the project, we've been supported by RPS, Fugro, and CLS Woods Hole Group as our industry partners. And after I've given the introduction, then each of them is going to give you a little bit of an insight into their organization and the role that they've taken in this project. I mean, just to give you a heads up, I'd say if you take those 3 organizations together collectively, they've acquired more data in the Gulf of Mexico, probably 5 or 10 times more data than all the other data that's being collected, and mainly on request of oil and gas operators. Okay, so as I said, we are undertaking the project Gulf Hub, leveraging industry academic partnerships to expand physical oceanographic data in the Gulf. I've got to figure out how to make this change the slide. Oh, that's weird. Oh, is this the? Oh.
Yeah, it looks like it's stuck.
Okay, it's
There you
working
go.
now. Yeah. So the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine Gulf Research Program has been undertaking this initiative called Understanding the Gulf Ocean System. And the objective is to understand the physical, biological and chemical processes in the Gulf of Mexico and their interaction. And the first phase of that was focused on the loop current system and a requirement called understanding the Gulf Ocean systems. Part of that, the first phase was a requirement to compile, analyze, and make publicly available data in the Gulf of Mexico, focused on the physical oceanographic data. And a prerequisite was that we conform with community standards for oceanographic data archival. So I'm sure for most people you already know this, but of course we're one of 11 regional associations. Part of our core mission is to maintain a comprehensive portal of chemical, biological and physical oceanographic data within the Gulf of Mexico. And I think an important part of this was that we are certified as a regional information coordinating entity under the GCOOS Act, which means that we are going to comply to the necessary standards of the IUS and also, of course, to the National Academy. And at the time when this opportunity was out there, we looked at the objectives of GCOOS and our own and saw commonality there, and were then successful in gaining support to develop the Gulf Hub system. I think a key thing, and as was reflected in my opening comments, was that GCOOS has always been engaged with the local Gulf of Mexico industry community and stakeholders, and that was one of the reasons that is through those relationships that we were able to bring in RPS, FUGRO and CLS to support our work. So in terms of the overall program, we have Texas A&M Corpus Christi, really looking after the kind of IT system architecture side of things. Tamu College Station, Steve DeMarco there, looking at the gap analysis and also supporting browser development. RPS, who have been working really hard on our ERDAP implementation, metadata definition and ingesting data into our ERDAP server. CLS Woods Hole Group, who have been post-processing the 2010 to 2019 NTL data sets to bring them up to IUS standards such that they're of sufficient integrity that they can be used scientifically. FUGRO for provision of some of the studies that they undertook, GUL and GUMBO, also data from REPSI and VM ADCP data. And then finally, Ocean Sierra, which is myself, which has just been helping with the project management and data discovery. So through the project, we've been emphasizing on collaboration, of course, within our team and with the other GCOOS awardees and with who are also going to be producing data which will be ingested once we get the fully post-processed QC data. And then we've been reaching out to international partners, industry consortiums, individual oil and gas companies, and then the metocean contractors who are on our team. So that's been relatively straightforward. And then throughout the project, we've adopted the FAIR guiding principles: findable, datable, accessible data, interoperable data, and reusable data. This slide just summarizes the overall structure of the architecture of our system through this data flow diagram. Data coming in for data ingestion and refactoring, going into the Gulf Hub database, then being in metadata being enhanced such that it reached the ISO standards, and then netcdf files being ingested into our ERDAP server. And ultimately that data will go through GCOOS to NCEI. And then finally, we've also developed a visualization tool to allow you to browse the data, as well as being able to just query the data using ERDAP. So in terms of a quick discussion of some of the things that we've ingested, we've ingested 3 data sets provided by Fugro. These actually are all deep water near bed data sets, primarily focused on characterizing topographic Rossby waves along the Sigbee escarpment, and also looking at quantifying near bed currents. And so these data sets are all data sets that were previously proprietary and were donated to the project by Fugro, which was quite a significant amount of information. Now the NTL data is a public data set. However, the data is an operational data set and needs to be cleaned up quite significantly before it can be ingested and used for scientific purposes. This data is primarily collected with Teledyne RD instruments, 38 kilohertz ADCPs, off drilling rigs and platforms in greater than 500 meters in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's typically currents through the top 1,000 meters of the water column. This data has to be cleaned up before it's sufficiently, its integrity is sufficient to be used for scientific purposes. On the display on the right-hand side of the screen, we're just showing a time sequence of data sets month by month through the last 10 years as they became available, because a lot of this data were collected off mobile drilling units, and those units move around the Gulf of Mexico. So obviously the permanent platforms, there were very long time histories of data, but for the modules, they were moving around. Okay, the next set of data that was donated to Gulf Hub was vessel mount ADCP data collected by the oil and gas industry during offshore operations when they've got very sensitive construction or drilling activities. We've ingested around about just over 2,000 transects of data, and they're now available on the ERDAP server, and this is just a sequence showing progression of them through time. Finally, one of the things that we've done, and you can see this as this movie progresses, is to allow users to kind of characterize or determine the value of data sets, particularly when they're looking at transect data sets and the like, because there's so many different data sets. This allows them to look at the data sets relative to the sea surface height data in the Gulf of Mexico and determine if the data sets would be of interest to them. Excuse me. This is of particular interest if you're trying to select transects to look at structures through the frontal eddies on the loop current. And now you can see all the transect data coming in during this period in 2007. I could let this run all the way through, and you could even see the deep water Macondo impacts on the amount of observations that were made, because when the moratorium on drilling came into play, all the rigs turned off their ADCPs as they moved off site. But this is to allow a user to make a quantitative assessment of the value of data sets that are in the ERDAP database. So we need to have an effective method of promoting this data to the scientific research community. And that's one of the challenges that we're addressing right now through articles going out in our monthly newsletter and papers being given at relevant conferences and exhibitions and industry events. The intended audience includes research scientists, particularly in numerical modeling, for calibration and validation of the modeling studies. Right now, most of the data we've brought in is pre-2010. The modeling studies that are being conducted by one of the other UGOS recipients are all for later in time. So it will only be when we've ingested the later sets of NTL data and other vessel mount data that they will be able to use that to validate and calibrate their models. Obviously, research scientists, in particular, I think here the deep water data from Gullgumber and Ripsea really is a unique data set that would allow researchers to really improve their understanding of the formation and propagation of topographic Rossby waves. Next, of course, the GCOOS and IOOS community. And then finally, the final user is the energy industry. By producing such a high quality data set, it'll be able to be downloaded and used by either operators or by contractors and service companies that want to analyze the data and produce value-added products from it. So I think in conclusion, I think it's demonstrated the changing position of the energy industry and their eagerness to share their data. And it's really highlighted the amount of data that the community has. I think by the end of the first 2 years, I think we'll have around about 3,000 individual data sets that were previously proprietary in the system, plus around about 2,000 that were public data sets where we've enhanced their metadata. The pipeline that we have means that after 2 years, we will only have ingested probably 50% of the data that we've identified and now understand will become available. So there's potential for much more data to go into Gulf Hub that was previously proprietary and cost millions of dollars to collect. I have to acknowledge, of course, that this project was supported by the Gulf Research Program at the National Academy of Sciences. But also, finally, once again, acknowledge the significant contribution of data sets from Deep Star and also from Fugro. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. We've now got 3 speakers. Kelly Nee from RPS North America. Kelly is the Executive Director for Ocean Sciences. I think our RPS North America is probably the longest serving Gulf of Mexico metocean contractor. We have Ben Williams from Fugro. Ben is the Regional Metocean Director for the Americas. And then we also have Rafael Ramos from CLS Woods Hole Group, who's their Regional Manager for Houston. So I think if you would like to go next, Kelly, then maybe Jen can transfer this screen sharing to you.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Jan. This is asking me now to set my system preferences. Let me just. Yeah, Jen, it doesn't seem to be letting me share my screen.
Let's see.
It's asking me to give you control of my screen, it looks like.
you should have presenter access. It doesn't have, let's see, let me try to take it back from myself. Give me 1 second here. Take it from myself and we'll try this again. Okay, try again.
Let's see. Sorry, it's asking my computer to just change the system preferences, which is requiring me to. All right, now it's telling me I'm going to have to restart GoToMeeting in order to apply the changes and share my screen. So that means I'm going to get kicked out. Jan, maybe move on to the next person, and hopefully by the time I come back in, I'll be able to share my screen. Sorry about this.
Kelly, if it's not a big presentation, maybe you can just send your slides quickly to Jen and we can advance them as you go. Would that be an alternative?
Yep, that's totally fine too. Okay. Let me do that. You know, I can't count how many hours of these things I've been on, and I've never had a problem before. So sorry about this, everyone. Let's see.
But then Kelly, this is Barb. I would say if this is your first burp, you were way overdue.
Oh, thanks, Barb.
Just saying.
Kelly, do you need my email? I'll send it to you in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. In the meantime, maybe we'll get Ben to go ahead and give his summary.
Sure, that's fine too.
Yeah. If you're ready to go, Ben.
Yeah. Jen, if you can make me presenter.
Absolutely.
Hopefully I won't have to reboot.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
This GoToMeeting trying to catch up with Zoom and Teams. It's all these updates they're pushing out, right?
Oh, I know.
Ben could vouch for me. I did a meeting with him last week and I had no issues.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay, Ben, you are presenter. And then Carrie, I'm going to send you my email now.
I found it, Jim. So that's on the way.
Okay, great.
Okay. Everyone can hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. I'll provide a quick overview of a long history of Fugro. So Fugro is a Dutch multinational company founded in 1962 as a engineering company for foundation technology, soil mechanics, or in Dutch, you can see below how they got Fugro out of that. And if anybody can pronounce that in Dutch appropriately, maybe I'll owe them a beer in April in New Orleans. The large landmark mergers that really apply to the Gulf Coast are the merger with McClelland in '87, which made Fugro the largest geotechnical engineering consortium. Through some accounting anomalies, the merger a couple months later actually turned out to be a takeover because of some issues there. And then the acquisition of Johnny Chance in 1991 that many people probably remember from Gulf Coast in those days. Fugro's key markets and services. So this is from the 2019 annual report. So we can all imagine this has been ripped up and thrown away. Since then, with the changes this year and the decline of oil and gas, from the regional directors meeting I had last week, I think we're running at about 35% of in oil and gas percentage now, with infrastructure, nautical, and renewables all picking up the slack. and you can see the split across activity in the globe. So the global reach of Fugro is probably not a surprise to many, but again, from 2019 numbers, you can see the offices across the Americas with just over 2,000 employees. I think that's probably dipped to about 1,850 or 1,900 right now with the downturn this year and some unfortunate reductions we've had to make, but definitely a global presence. So Fugro in the Gulf of Mexico, more specifically, with the John Chance organization becoming part of Fugro, Fugro USA Marine has been providing offshore positioning and for the oil and gas industry for more than 45 years now, using first geosynchronous satellite positioning systems prior to GPS and various other technologies supporting rig positioning and subsea positioning all the way through to the full water column projects in deep water now, and leading as we've moved to a more remote positioning and remote processing, removing people from offshore installations and doing it over VSAT and from the remote operations centers in Houston and Lafayette. And as delivered all of 5 minutes ago, we just had the update. So Geotech has been providing Gulf of Mexico services 1946 under the McClellan brand prior to the Fugro merger, and we have completed almost 9,000 geotechnical site investigations in the U.S. and Mexico in the Gulf of Mexico. And along with that, in more recent history, an additional 1,000 projects performed by our geoconsulting group. That includes SEEP surveys and analysis and desktop studies. The project involvement map for the geoconsulting projects is shown below. And then recently, as some of you may know, our hydrographic survey department or service line that was based out of San Diego in the form of Pelagos has joined us in Houston and has been doing quite a few NOAA projects on both East and West Coast, and have just recently completed the NOAA Apalachicola hydrographic survey there. Which was also an opportunity for us to deploy our FAS 900 or FAS 901 autonomous hydrographic survey vessel. So that was piloted from the remote control center while also conducting offshore operations with another vessel as a force multiplier to complete that project. The projects that most of you are more familiar with and been touched on is some of the sustained observations that we've been continuing for many years in the Gulf of Mexico, namely the Cascade Chinook wave scan buoy that's been featured in quite a few uses via NDBC in at station 42360. People are often surprised that that's actually a Fugro system that's been out for Petrobras initially, and then Murphy is currently operating that project and is currently on contract to run through 2025. As we've touched in the meeting already, the Shell Stones and National Academy's moorings featuring as NDBC station 42395. With the Stones component, the mooring there on the left being contracted through 2025, and the National Academy's mooring currently contracted to remain in place until October of 2021. The HF Radars project that almost all of you know about is Fugro's contribution to support closing the gaps along the Louisiana coast. I had to scroll back before so many terrible storms to find a nice plot where most of the radars were up and running, but hopefully they'll all be back up and running again soon. and we've been running numerous NTL compliant rig ACP systems since 2004, as described by Jan in his comments. So I was asked what Fugro and GCOOS could collaborate on going forward, and what Fugro supported along with this. So we definitely support closing the gaps on the Gulf Coast. Fugro supporting when appropriate and are interested in helping bridge the gap between USM's radars and Texas A&M radars. As most of you assume, we're a Houston business, but Fugro USA Marine is actually a Louisiana registered business. So are happy to continue that work and hopefully have the opportunity to continue filling those gaps. As I've mentioned, the mooring sustained observations we have from those moorings in the Gulf of Mexico, we are continuing to service on 6 monthly intervals. Each mooring is now being moved to annual services, but we have split those so that we have a scheduled cruise every April and every October. We've taken some opportunity in pre-COVID times to extend and bring other researchers out on those cruises. We're happy to continue providing that support. So if people need glider deployments or glider recoveries or drifter deployments or drifter recoveries or other mooring services or anything that can support the wider GCOOS community, don't hesitate to reach out to me, and we can do our best to make that work. Despite not being briefed by Barb, Fugro is happy to support in any way the NTL rig-based current measurement data being brought into the GCOOS data portal, and are happy to roll that out on real-time observations. That was me trying to keep it as short and sweet as possible. Any questions?
I think maybe we could leave the questions to the end, Ben. If Kelly is able now, maybe we could have her presentation.
I think Jen said she got my slides okay, so go ahead.
Okay.
Yep, I do. I'm just going to pull them up right now. Hold on 1 sec here. And what happened? Okay, here we go. Okay, Kelly, just tell me when you need me to change the slide.
Okay, will do. Thanks, Jen.
You got it.
All right. Thank you to Barb and to the board for inviting me to come and talk a little bit about our role in the Gulf Hub project and also give a little background on RPS and what we do globally all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. We were founded in 1970. Today we are a global professional services firm of about 5,500 people. We work in 125 countries across all 6 continents. And at a high level, our work really focuses on defining, designing, and managing projects that are focused on sustainability, urbanization, and resource scarcity. Jen, if you could go over to the next slide, that'd be great. So as a company, we deliver a very broad range of services across the asset lifecycle. So from property to energy, transport, water, and defense and government services. The services that we provide that are most relevant to the Gulf of Mexico region, on the energy side, we focus on oil and gas, on renewables. We also focus on the energy side on nuclear facilities, power and gas networks, and storage. On the government services side, a strong focus on safety and security and information and technology. In transportation, we do a typical roads, rail, and aviation, but also have a pretty strong business in ports. And on the water side, focus on water management, wastewater management, flooding and drainage, and groundwater. Next slide, Jen. Thank you. So the North American business is comprised of 3 divisions. There's the Ocean Science Division, which I run. We have an Environment Division, an Infrastructure Division, and then our Global Energy business also has a strong presence in North America. And that's focused on mid-ocean data measurement and analysis, operations, and training. Many of the audience might be more familiar with some of the legacy businesses that RPS has acquired over the years. Those include Evans Hamilton, which was based in Houston but had offices across the country, and also Applied Science Associates, which was based in Rhode Island but had offices across the globe. And that's how I joined RPS. I was employee of Applied Science Associates. Way back. Next slide, Jen. Thank you. I really like showing this slide because it shows the full arc of where the ocean science business has sort of come from and where it is today, or what it encompasses today. Our history is really founded on numerical modeling with a particular focus on pollutant transport. But as this service became increasingly popular, especially after Exxon Valdez and Open 90, it became really clear that, as numerical modeling grew and grew and grew, and the need for it grew and grew and grew, that we had a data problem on our hands. The data that we needed internally to use to support our modeling was cumbersome. It was cumbersome to access. It was cumbersome to format. So in the late 90s, we really began building a business around data management itself. And now, we've gone from just supporting clients and numerical modeling of pollutant transport all the way to providing real-time data feeds to a lifeguard station in Dubai, which is what you see there on the right-hand side. So we encompass a really wide range of services around modeling and data management at this point. Next slide, Jen. In the Gulf of Mexico, we focus on a number of different things. One of the biggest being natural resources data assessment. Natural resources damage assessment. I have data management on my mind. And there's really no better example of that than the Deepwater Horizon. So we supported NOAA in the NERDA process from nearly the very beginning of that spill all the way through until the case was settled. And you see there a picture of Debbie French McKay, one of our leading senior scientists, testifying before Congress during the event. We also focus on environmental risk assessments in the Gulf. More recently, we've done a lot of support of deep water ports. So we're currently working on 3 deep water port applications and third-party EISs. We're working on a big project right now with Bessie related to oil spill response planning. So we're working with them to develop offshore response information for some of the existing area contingency plans in the Gulf. We do net environmental benefit work, decommissioning and asset life extensions. Really interesting service that we provide in the Gulf is automated spill forecasting. So we work with folks in the Gulf to provide daily forecasts of potential or hypothetical spills from assets, and also allow them to backtrack where detected oil might have come from. On the Met Ocean side, we have a really long history of calibration, deployment, and maintenance and recovery of a whole range of sensors, so winds, waves, currents, installed in offshore assets around the Gulf of Mexico. We provide data processing, analysis, and interpretation of the data that we collect. Our experience in that dates all the way back to the 1970s and the Evans Hamilton business. More recently, we've been participating in programs like the PIES program, the PIES studies that happened in the early 2000s. Today, we focus on design, installation, and maintenance of environmental modeling systems, design, deployment, and recovery of moorings in deep water, and all of our real-time collection systems comply with the BOEM MTL as well. We also do quite a bit of hydrodynamic modeling to support some of the pollutant transport modeling that we do in the Gulf. And of course, we provide data management and communication services for projects like Gulf Hub, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Next slide, Jen. So Barb asked me to talk a little bit about opportunities for Gulf of Mexico observing too, and together a few thoughts around that. One of the biggest things that jumps out to me is collaboration of various entities. So collaboration with industry, and in particular collaboration with emerging industries like offshore wind. I think there's a real opportunity there to institutionalize data sharing. I want to give a big shout out to Shell for so openly sharing some of their floating LiDAR data up in the Northeast. We're helping GCOOS with the Atlantic Shores data, and I know GCOOS is managing the Mayflower data, so that's really good to see. Ørsted is also beginning to share things like glider data. They're working with GCOOS. They have a glider deployed and are sharing that data openly.
So really, really glad to see the offshore wind industry taking steps to be sharing data openly. I also think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration across entities like regional associations, regional ocean councils, other regional nonprofits. Everyone's got their own unique issue of concern, but collaborating can really help minimize duplication of effort, and everyone benefits from that. And another great example of that is MARICOOS and NEARCOOS collaborating with Shell to get the floating LiDAR data into their portals. And making sure that it's been integrated into the various ERDAPs in a consistent manner. So, and I think there's an opportunity to incentivize collaboration, right? So dedicating funding to projects that are collaborative provides some more efficient use of limited funds. Leveraging idle assets. So, we sometimes have equipment sitting on our shelf. It's not being used. It's not providing value to us just sitting on a shelf. It's not providing value to anyone just sitting on a shelf. We've thought about maybe deploying it at our own cost and selling the data, and that's not a very IUC approach though. So interested in, how could we repurpose idle equipment to provide value to the community and sort of fill some of the gaps that are out there. It's definitely something we're interested in chatting about. Data management. Jan already teed up the FAIR principles quite nicely for me. If data isn't findable, if it's not accessible, interoperable, reusable, it loses its value, right? We spend a lot of money to collect this data. We need to make sure that it's getting used. So something like 5 to 10% of budgets should really be invested in data management, research budgets, so data collection budgets, to make sure that the data products are interoperable. Engagement and outreach is a really important piece of that, I think. We need to be marketing and advertising data and data services. We need people using the data that we're collecting. We need to be using our social networks, tech forums, starting hackathons, whatever it is. We need to be talking about the data and how it can be used. I think demonstrated use of data is a really good avenue to justify the funding for the data and the data management. We also need to make sure that we're measuring how the data is used, that we're understanding how that it's used so that we can talk about the value that it provides. And for data that turns into derived products, that there's a traceable audit chain so that we're really understanding the value of the original data products. There's huge opportunity and new platforms. Technology changes quickly, and it changes quickly on the measurement side too. I think Bill is going to talk a little bit more about colliders in a bit. But we've also got startups like Dive Technologies up here in the Northeast that are building AUVs with unmatched payload capacities and looking at how they might use those to support emerging industries like offshore wind. We have options now for data streaming and integration of IoT. So these technologies are really launching us past the concept of near real-time data to providing actual real-time information to responding to critical situations. Things like spills or HABs, whatever it might be, but to have data, at your fingertips in actual real time. On the technology and the sort of cloud front, we really need to take data management to where the action is, and the action is in the cloud, right? It's scalable, it's cost-efficient solution for increasing availability and accessibility to data. We really need the data management tools and platforms that we're using now to keep up with that. So we need to focus on swapping out monolithic things like threads and DAP for faster, lightweight versions. We need to focus on defining and designing a sort of open architecture data management system that's modular, that's easy to enhance and extend, and that really supports the next generation of analysis. So big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever the latest and greatest buzzword is, we need to make sure that we're keeping up. All right, next slide, please, Jen. So then Barb also asked me to touch quickly on what the RPS role is on the Gulf Hub project. So that's summarized here. On the data and metadata side, we really focused on helping define the standards, which ended up being CF 1.6, ACDD, the IUCE metadata profile, plus some special NTL specific fields that were necessary in order to correctly characterize that data using the metadata. We hosted quite a few metadata workshops over the course of the project so far. and pulled together sort of a full compilation of all of the metadata requirements as a Google sheet that we reviewed with the data providers based on the specific data challenges that they were focused on. We auto-generated as much metadata as we could based on the data sets that we were given, but we did have to talk through with the data providers some of the input that really only they could give us, that we couldn't automatically generate. We provided a whole lot of feedback to data providers, what changes were needed in their files that they were submitting. And then finally, we wrote a whole series of scripts and tools to convert the native formats to compliant NetCDF files. All the scripts and tools are stored in GitHub and available for reuse. We used the compliance checker to assist with QA/QC to make sure that all the files were meeting the standards that we established. And finally, we assisted with data distribution using, and that was a really good tool for distributing the data that we had gathered together through this process. Next slide, Jen. So this is an overview of where we are today, and Jan already touched on all of these data sets, so I'm not going to go through them again. But ERDAP is currently hosting north of 4,500 data sets for the Gulf Hub project, which is fantastic. Next slide, Jen. And as I said, they're all on ERDAP. ERDAP doesn't look particularly sexy when you look at the web application, but it's a really powerful tool, and it's really good for machine-to-machine access of data. It lets modelers really dig into and define exactly what they want and pull out just the data that they need. We initially set it up as a dev server for testing. We use that for testing the process of getting the NTL data onto ERDAP, which hadn't been done before, the VMM PDCP data into ERDAP. And then we used it as a place where all of the data providers could review their the data sets that they were providing into Gulf Hub. And next slide, Jen. So remaining on Gulf Hub, just continuing to integrate data sets throughout the end of the year, transition the dev ERDAP that we've set up to production. And finally, I'll touch on education and outreach again, really making sure that the community understands what new data sets are available for their use, so that the data gets used, because that's really how we add value to the data. Right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kelly. I think one of the things that I think is quite interesting to point out there is that Kelly spent about 2 seconds or 5 seconds talking about metadata standards, but we spent about 6 months actually doing that. And one of the things that really did come to light through that process was that even when you were getting extremely good, well-documented data sets to satisfy the IUS requirements for metadata, we had to, in most cases, go back to the original people responsible for the acquisition of that data to bring the data up to the standards. And it really did, it was quite scary, because I thought that most of that data, it would be relatively straightforward to do, but it really does reinforce the need for people to make sure that when they're collecting data, that they work on the metadata component in detail and make sure that all of the metadata is completely compliant, because if it's not and they retire, then that data will probably not be able to be used. Okay, so our final presentation is by Rafael Ramos from CLS Woods Hole Group. If you could give the screen to him, please, Jen.
Rafael, you should.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all for inviting Woods Hole Group to this forum. We are part of the 3 commercial companies working for or aiding GCOOS in the data acquisition and display as part of the Gulf Hub project. I'm going to start by doing a little bit of an introduction of Woods Hole Group. Woods Hole Group was born as a spin-off of the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And then it was acquired lately by a group of French investors called CLS. That is an international group of companies that have 720 employees around the world, and they have offices in 25 locations. The headquarters are located in Toulouse, France. CLS was themselves a subsidiary of GCOOS, which is the French space agency, and now part owned by CNP, which is a European group of investors that focus on sustainable green companies. CLS was created by GCOOS and Ifremer, that is the French Oceanographic Institute, originally to manage the Argos system. And since then, it has grown and has now 5 main business lines, which is sustainable management of fisheries, fleet management, maritime safety and security, energy and mining, and environment and climate. In the US, Woods Hole Group has 6 locations. And although we offer all the services that the main company and all the subsidiaries have to provide, we focus on 3 main business lines that are our business units. One of them is sustainable fisheries management. The second one is environmental and climate. And the third one is energy and mining. And we provide a very wide portfolio of services going from satellite telemetry to sargassum tracking to metocean measurements and even infrastructure settlement and studies along those lines. Woods Hole Group, you may be familiar with us from before we joined CLS. As currently integrated, we are a merge of 3 different companies. One of them is Horizon Marine, which used to provide services of characterization, tracking, and measurement of loop current eddies. The legacy CLS company in the US, which was called CLS Americas, they were focused on fisheries management and the tracking of marine organisms. So many of you may be familiar with them. And the legacy Woods Hole Group, which used to provide services, metocean services, including measurement from multiple platforms, from like rig systems, buoys, bottom-mounted, etc. And also specialized studies for the offshore oil and gas industry. Horizon Marine was founded in 1982 and merged the group in 2015. And Woods Hole Group was founded in 1986 and joined the group in 2017. And we have been living happily ever after. There you go. Our involvement in the Gulf Hub project is mainly the quality control and quality assurance of the data, the NTL data that originally was processed for Deep Star, and now the latest contribution of industry to that has been processed as part of the Gulf Hub project. There are, as Jan mentioned before, something that should be very straightforward, sometimes is not. And the problem is that several issues plague the data. There are metadata errors. For example, the wrong reported coordinates. As you can see in this map, some rigs are up in Florida on shore. There are telemetry gaps, that data that was not transmitted, and unfortunately, since it was not transmitted, is lost, or data that is received but is received wrongly and then not archived. There are issues with the wrong setting of instruments with acoustic interference. This is mainly ADCP data. And there's also issues with the current screening mechanism for data that is very basic. And also there are some other issues with the type of archiving that NDBC uses for data, like multiple instruments in the same site and things like that. So all those data need to be reviewed and corrected. Just to give you an example, in order to actually verify the position of a rig, we need to use 3 or 4 different sources, independent sources for location. The original rig metadata coordinates, then we use the coordinates provided by the rig zone, then we use the borehole BASI coordinates, and sometimes we have differences in the order of 5 kilometers from, for any of those sources. So just to emphasize the point that Kelly and Jan did before, it is very important to document the data correctly, and there should be a good practice in keeping that, because sometimes the metadata is just as important as the data itself. If you don't have the right location, then the data is useless. I'm going to give you some statistics. These are from the previous work that we did for DeepStar. This is not entirely covering the new processing we're doing. About 80% of all the data sets that were provided as part of the NTL program have position errors. Some of them are pretty obvious in different continents or different hemispheres, but some of them are not. And you need to really dig deeply into what the source of the problem is. We have 50% of the records contain gaps, so we need to split those. And maybe sometimes we have 3 or 4 different intervals for the same deployment. And then the aforementioned data lost to telemetry, which is about 6% of the data. And overall, about 15% of all the data set were discarded by issues that could not be verified or corrected. And to add to that, there are a lot of operator issues and errors that that make some of the data not valid, about 40%. The next slide is a little bit more philosophical. And I don't know if I misunderstood what Barb meant by us providing some ideas here, but I'm with Kelly in the interpretation of how GCOOS and Woodsall Group and other companies, private companies in this call can contribute or can help GCOOS in enhancing the observing system. Of course, the obvious is the curation of existing data, especially NTL data. But we also need to establish an agreed best practices and standards, including metadata and some check lists to make sure that the instruments are mounted right and that some basic procedures are followed. We also need to enhance a collaboration with Mexico, Cuba, and other countries in the intra-America Seas. Also, I think the example of the observatory that Ben is handling with Fugro, I think is a very good example of what it could be replicated and enhanced and applied elsewhere, right? Also, I think part of, and this goes along the lines as Kelly was saying, we need to spread the word of what data we have, right? And that comes with provide easy access, visualization, and download capabilities. And not only to scientists, but to the public in general and interested stakeholders. And we could also do so or generate some products that may be easy to do, but maybe of great use for other people, that are not scientists. For example, I'm thinking about the availability or the ability to create some alarms on when a sea state is above certain limit or something along currents for port operators or things like that. That would be a great way to create the need for the people and the public to engage with the data that we provide, and then of course that derives in a need for that data, right? We also something that probably is lacking is the need to assimilate other data, not necessarily ocean related, but pertinent to ocean phenomena. For example, river discharge and things like that. I think that would be a nice addition to the data that we currently display. Again, this is trying to make these the go-to site for data gathering in the Gulf of Mexico, right? Instead of going to 3 different sites and jumping from site to site to download the information that we require. And also, I participated last week in a forum funded by the WMO. And I was reminded of the richness of data collection there is in the Gulf of Mexico. And also, it was very interesting to see that of the many presentations that were on the specific theme of uncertainty, not a single one had the same definition. And that is concerning, and that is why I go back to establishing best practices and standards. That's it.
Thanks very much, Rafael. Joe, I'm just conscious of the fact that we've run over on the time, and we did start 15 minutes late and we finished 30 minutes late, so we're equally guilty here. Do you want to leave maybe at the end, if people have some questions they want to have to ask the presenters, we do it at the end of the meeting?
Yeah, okay, we can do it that way. One way or the other. We could do it now, we could do it at the end of the meeting. I guess, with respect to other presenters, let's go ahead and queue them up on time or as close to on time as we can, and then come back to your group at the end. just let me say, I think this is a tremendous example of collaboration between industry and GCOOS, IUS. This is really, really great stuff. And you're hitting the nail way on the head when you start talking about metadata standards. You guys recall I was on the WMO metadata standard development team for about 5 years. And I didn't know what metadata really was until I started going over there and getting involved in it. And it is so important. It cannot be underemphasized or overemphasized. But great work on your guys' part. I do have some questions for later on. And before we move on, I want to recognize that Carl Kuhlman has joined us. Carl, welcome, always welcome, and glad to have you here. Okay, Barb, you want to, shall we move on to Laura?
Yes, so it's my pleasure to introduce Laura Bowie, who is the Executive Director for Gulf of Mexico Alliance. I suspect she needs no introduction in this group, but she's been the director since 2013. She lives in Ocean Springs, and I always like to say this. I looked it up, Laura, that you grew up in Pascagoula. So, yes. So, with that short introduction, Laura, please take it away.
Great, thank you. Let's see. First of all, can people see my slides?
Laura, no,
Not yet.
not yet. We did for a minute. So just click back onto the share of your screen.
Click back onto what?
Your screen. So we're at the bottom where your mouse, yeah, click on the bottom of the screen, and your mic, camera, and screen should pop up. There you go.
Okay, got it. I usually have a tech person to do this for me, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Barb. We have worked together for a very long time, and I always appreciate coming to the GCOOS meetings. I look forward to them, and I learn so much when I come, so I appreciate that you always let us give a quick update too. I'm going to not talk nearly as much about data. I'm going to talk about some fun stuff. It's more of an outreach kind of stuff, but I hope you'll appreciate this quick GOMA update. Really, we work so closely with GCOOS that I always like to try to touch on the things that we're working on together. Make sure I can advance my slides here. Okay. For those of you that I don't know on this call, I just real quick, this is my only slide about what is a GOMA, right? What is GOMA? Gulf of Mexico Alliance. But we're basically a regional network of stakeholders that were started by the 5 Gulf states back in 2004 when Governor Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida and Haley Barbour was the governor of Mississippi. They really worked together to pull the other states in and ask the question, are there some things that we could, issues that we could collectively address together instead of on a state-by-state basis? And so they established our mission back then, which we revisit from time to time, and it remains the same all these years later. But that is to enhance the ecological and economic health of the Gulf of Mexico region through increased regional collaboration. And it's those last 3 words that really is the nuts and bolts of GOMA. We want to pull together varieties of people, wide varieties of people, states and federal agencies, NGOs, academics, business partners, to really take a look at some of these priority issues that are a priority for all 5 states. So that was my quick intro slide. So anybody that doesn't know enough about us and wants to learn more, I'm happy to get directly with you. But I didn't want to bore those of you that already know about GOMA. But you know that if you do know us, you know that our priorities are these here on the screen. These are the ones that the states have determined are priority for us in the last 5 years. We're right now going through the process of doing strategic planning and finding out what our priorities are going to be for the next 5 years. We're in that process right now, and FYI, they're not going to change much. Everybody figured that we really have found a sweet spot there on our priorities, and there's still work to be done in these categories. Today, I was going to point out a couple of projects we have going on where we work with GCOOS, or GCOOS helps to inform it, or it sits on our advisory board, and they fall within these particular priority issue teams: our data and monitoring team, our habitat team, water team, and our education team. So I just wanted to point a few of those out to you guys. And this is our first one. We're very excited. I have notes here, and I don't want to miss out on not saying the right thing. This is a great campaign. We kicked it off on January 1. It's called Embrace the Gulf 2020. And it has lots of moving parts. This particular piece of it that I wanted to show to you is a daily fact-based message that goes out over social media, goes out over 3 different platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We call it 365 messages, although I know, because people have pointed it out to me, we actually have 366 days in the year 2020. This was a leap year, if anybody remembers back that far. So, so it's really a 366 messages. But when we started this process a couple of years back, we didn't realize it, and we affectionately called it the 365 messages portion of it. They go out every single day, and it's basically like did you know kind of facts, and they're fact-based messages about the Gulf of Mexico, about the value, the sustainability, the productivity of the Gulf. And so we really are, it's really just an awareness campaign. We want people to appreciate the Gulf of Mexico in a year that is likely and has been an anniversary for lots of things. You know, with all the hurricane activity this year, of course, people are going to think about hurricanes, and then also it was an anniversary for the oil spill as well. And we really were trying to divert from that and put out daily good messages about the Gulf of Mexico to try to take a little energy away from some of those negative messages that people might be hearing about the Gulf. Some of our more interesting posts have been maps and the depth of the Gulf, and the interesting creatures like a vampire squid. We had one particular, I think it was a shark post one day back in June that got 18,000 hits, a little more than 18,000 hits in just one day. So it tells you there are people out there who love the Gulf of Mexico and love getting these facts. GCOOS is a great partner on this project because we have partners sitting in all 5 states who represent those states and are willing to help us boost these messages into their respective areas. And GCOOS has been a great partner to do that with us. In fact, another piece to this campaign is that we got proclamations. We've gotten them from all 5 states. So they're all done. They're posted on our website, on the www.embracethegulf.org website. I think Chris Simonello probably sits on our steering committee, Embrace the Gulf Steering Committee, and was extremely instrumental in getting our very first town or city of St. Petersburg proclamation. So that was the very first proclamation from a city that came in. And now I think this might even be an old slide. I think we have more than 50, but cities, towns, counties, parishes that have all proclaimed 2020 as the year to embrace the Gulf. What does that mean? You know, maybe it doesn't mean a whole lot, but what it does say is that they've bought into it. They understand how relevant the Gulf of Mexico is and how important it is to really spread the good news about what the Gulf of Mexico does for us on a daily basis, what it does for our communities, what it does for tourism, what it does for our industries. And so these are all very important facts that we're trying to get out there, and we really appreciate the efforts of our partners to help us get the messages, and especially people like Chris, who helped us get these proclamations from the various states, feds, and cities and towns. Let's see, so another of the projects that we have going on with GCOOS. GCOOS sits on our advisory committee for this particular project. It's the Gulf of Mexico Open Data Platform. It has just completed populating it with seagrass data sets as a proof of concept, so it's not quite even publicly available yet. In fact, there's a webinar that GOMA just started on a different channel, if you will, and it's actually presenting this particular, the GoMod platform to an audience there on a different channel. It just started about 7 minutes ago. But it's a proof of concept just to show that we are able to do this. We've got the seagrass data in there. It's a framework. The framework has been done. It's based on an Esri hub that we purchased the license to, and we have multiple licenses to that. And there are 2 steps to making this happen. Number 1, we had to identify the data sets that were out there related to seagrasses. So we had to do an assessment of what was out there. And then second, we had to make that connection, both that human and electronic connection, because what we're doing is we are not holding the data. We're not holding the seagrass data. We are making an actual machine-to-machine electronic connection with the people who do hold the data, so that as the data gets updated, the links get updated and you can access this. Now, why you might want to know why seagrasses? Well, it was low-hanging fruit. That's why we already had the data sets identified, and we needed to prove that this GoMod platform, this open data platform idea would work and would be usable by the community that needed it. And so we started with seagrasses, but the next steps are they've identified, the GOMA teams anyway, have identified the priority habitats that they want this also to happen in. Things like benthic data layers. They want to do this for mangroves, salt marshes, and oysters. So those are our next steps. It's, like I said, it's not online quite yet. They're rolling it out right now on a different webinar. And very soon, probably in the next week or so, we will have it available for people to test out and test drive it. We've been test driving it with our state agency personnel for the last couple of weeks to make sure it was ready to be revealed. This is the kind of information that the state agency resource managers need in order to plan their restoration projects. You know, GOMA doesn't do big restoration. We don't do big on the ground backhoe moving, you know, big dirt moving projects. But what we do is provide the foundational aspects that our state resource managers need in order to make good restoration plans. So that's what this is going to help with. Our partners on this are NatureServe and Esri. We're going to continue to, NatureServe built it on an Esri platform. We're going to continue to partner with Esri after NatureServe hands it off to us. So we're really excited about that. And like I said, GCOOS sits on our advisory committee for this project. The funding for this came from our Gulf Star program. Both Shell and Chevron contributed to it, as well as NOAA. So it's a really good example of our public-private partnership that we started several years ago called Gulf Star, where we marry up or leverage federal funding with private funding, and we're able to produce products that really help our state resource managers. Another project that we've got that's partway through, this is called it's an economic impacts of HABs in Florida. We partnered with a group called the Balmoral Group to evaluate the financial impacts of harmful algal blooms on tourism, housing sales, boat dealers, commercial fishing, restaurants, hotels, that kind of tourism stuff. And they've created an entire dashboard to present that data. It explored connections to Google searches and Google search trends as well, and social media, and they were highly correlated with cancellations of hotels, dinner reservations, fishing trips, like that. This is just one page. You can see at the bottom of the screen, I think you can, that there's several pages to this dashboard, right? So you can slice and dice this data in a variety of different ways, and we're quite pleased with the outcome of what we got through this project. The next steps on this project is to take this same type of analysis and create a dashboard related to the HABs event that happened off the coast of Mississippi last summer. Not this summer, but last summer in 2019. We had a significant HABs event happen off the coast of Mississippi, and we're just about to enter into a contract to do the same type of analysis and do economic impacts from HABs on the Mississippi summer of 2019 event. This was a project that was also funded through GOMA's Gulf Star program, primarily with our private partner from Freeport-McMoRan. But we got lots of our data from public locations, so it really was a public-private partnership once again. We also have another data project going on. We have lots of projects, and I just picked out the data-centric ones to show you because I know that's what GCOOS is interested in and the ways that we partner best. This is another one out of our habitat team. This is the Northern Gulf Sediment Availability and Allocation Program. You know, our habitat team members love to give acronyms for everything, so it's called NGSAP, which doesn't really mean anything to me, but it means something to them. It's a GIS-based decision support tool. This is a second phase of a previous demonstration project that we recently completed for the state of Louisiana, and they liked it so well that their counterparts in the other Gulf states decided they would like to have this too. So we expanded the tool to fill a critical need for information on sediment resources that can be used for creation and restoration of coastal habitats. And it will certainly show where the gaps are in terms of information, what data is needed, how do we know what type of sediment is where and what the quality of it is. So once this is done, not only will you have somewhat of an inventory for the 5 Gulf states, you'll also be able to see where the gaps are. And so we'll begin working on that as well. Our partner on this particular phase of the project is the Water Institute of the Gulf. And once the analysis is complete to identify all the sources and put them all into an inventory, our next step will be to take it from a desktop version, which right now is how it's being built, but then it needs to become an online version so that it can be easily shared and used by the resource managers, the restoration planners in all 5 Gulf states. The funding source for this one was also from our Gulf Star program, from our EPA Gulf of Mexico program, EPA Gulf of Mexico division right here in Mississippi. And also we matched that against some of our private Gulf Star funds as well. So we were able to get, again, a great leveraged project between public and private funding sources to make a project that is beneficial to the Gulf states in their restoration planning. This tool is not yet available online. Like I said, right now it's being developed as a desktop utility, but it will soon. Our next step is to make it online. I did it quickly so that I knew we might need to save some time here. So that is where I'm going to pause here and see if anybody has any questions for me. You're an easy crowd.
Okay, well, if you do pop in a question, put it in the chat box, and I can always follow up with Laura if, you know, you're having trouble sleeping at 3 o'clock this morning and you come up with a question. I'll be happy to pass that on. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks, Barb.
Good to see you.
You too.
All right, gang. Next up is Bill Lynch, talking about gliders and the hurricane picket line. This should be interesting.
Okay, can you see my slide?
Yes.
Am I in the right? I'm not in the full briefing mode, am I? For some reason the dashboard is hiding what I can get to. Is it viewable, Joe, or is it?
I see the slide, but I see the other slides on the left side.
Yeah. Okay. For some reason the dashboard is covering up everything. Hold on one second here.
There you go.
It worked?
You got to click it. You were on it, but
There you go.
there we go.
All right. All right, I'll try and go into hyperspeed here because I know everybody's either between you and a beer or maybe picking up kids or whatever. But so two things that I'm going to hit on today for the meeting that I was asked by Barb, and one is the Underwater Gliders User Group, and then a little bit of a quick rundown on the Hurricane Gliders Picket Fence, the overall sort of effort there, but really drilling down to what's been done at GCOOS. So how do I get to my next slide? Is there a trick to that, Jan? Okay. Anyhow, so just briefly, just some background. There were several workshops, and over the past couple of years, Barb actually was a co-chair on one out at Stennis Space Center, with the glider user groups getting together and really coming up with a lot of different collaboration and efforts that could happen across the community. But more than typically, people go back to their day jobs and basically continue the communication and the collaboration maybe would break down. So the idea was to basically set up a steering group that can help facilitate the effort for collaboration and communication. So as you can, unfortunately, I'm being hidden here. Hold on one second. So anyhow, so we stood up the committee. I just, in order to stand up the steering committee to help facilitate the collaboration and communication, our attempt at setting this up, we had a small review panel that was comprised of IUs and IOC representatives, and we established like a rating criteria. This was after we put the call out for the nominations. And so we set up criteria for each of the sectors, and then further looked into balance the demographics of the committee based on technical, managerial, geographics, professional associations, gender balance, early career, and all as related to ocean glider technology. So as you can see, we actually, after coming up with the group, we really have a really good representation of the community, both geographically, technically, early career type of folks. As you can see, even in the Gulf of Mexico here, we have good representation. Barb really is as being a co-chair of one of the meetings. She is representing all the executive directors of all the regional associations. And we have Kevin Martin at USM, who a lot of us are very familiar with, on the board. Plus we have some of the Navy folks as well as being big participators. Obviously some of the largest glider users, probably almost worldwide on as far as the number of gliders that they operate, about 150. And then at the programmatic level, the government level, we have Mike Benzowitz. And then we want to definitely coordinate with the international community. So we have our representative on the international side, and then you can see all the other regional areas that are covered. We have great executive sponsors. A lot of you folks know them: Carl, Bob Houtman, Ben LaCour, David Legward, Victor Turpin, who's ex officio from the efforts that are going on with the JCOM ops and the international efforts and the European efforts over there. So that committee was stood up. And I'm not going to spend any time on this. I mean, the purpose of the committee is to provide vision, support, and guidance for advancing an active, widespread community of glider users that promotes ocean information, innovation, and integration. It's all about that collaboration piece. It's really so that we can promote opportunities. For instance, if you're putting a mission out there and somebody else knows about that mission, can you possibly strap on a sensor if there's an energy budget available on that vehicle for that deployment, where you can share that mission and maybe even share some of the costs. But ultimately, in the end, it's developing this inclusive underwater community that will push forward. The steering group will help prioritize and direct a lot of the efforts, but it really will be the overall community. So the next step in this will be establishing that underwater glider user group. Probably in the next week. Everybody that's been a part of the user community so far will receive an email to join the glider user group. And we're looking for as much participation. It doesn't mean that you have to own a glider. You may use the data. You may be a sensor type of person for putting on the gliders. You may just be very interested in leveraging other missions where you can strap on your sensor, that type of thing. But we're really looking to get as many participants in this, and starting next week. And then what will follow on, we have our website, and we've been working on it, and we're hoping by the end of October, we'll be able to unveil the website based on the requirements. And what you see here is just a brief front end of that website. So that's where we're at with that. And any other questions, please follow up with me at any time on that. Now, what I'd like to get into is a little bit on the glider hurricane picket fence effort. Obviously, forecasting storm intensity is challenging due to contributions from multiple drivers: storm track, wind shear, dry air entrainment, and air-sea interaction. So this effort here, that really is at the IUCE level, that includes from the Mid-Atlantic region, including Maracus, Socorro, Caracoos, GCOOS. The effort is to deploy gliders out there and basically get the ocean right in advance of oncoming tropical storms, as well as during and post-storm of what's happening with the ocean in preparation for the next storm and how long some of these phenomena last. The idea is to be able to measure the vertical and spatial ocean parameters, temperature, salinity, density, and the features like warm and cold water eddies, loop current that influence the surface heat content linked to intensity changes in hurricanes. As we all know, this has been a crazy year on that. You can see, I think as of last Tuesday, during our bi-weekly meetings that we have, the entire community meets twice a week throughout the hurricane season. We've had about 56 deployments, 2,155 glider days reported as of September 25th. So some great efforts. A lot of these data are being assimilated into the real-time models. And some deployments are not specific to the hurricane picket fence. In other words, they're not funded specifically for that, but they have other missions, whether they be for HABs or biological missions, but we're able to leverage the temperature salinity measurements, and they're provided to the DAC so that they ultimately get to the GTS server for models. Here's just a quick snapshot from Gandalf. You can see pretty much, we don't have the Mid-Atlantic region on here right now. I think at one time, if Bob can correct me, I think we were at 18 total that he was tracking on Gandalf, but you can see down in the Caribbean, along the southeast coast and in the Gulf of Mexico, all the glider operations are going on in addition to the Argo floats that are out there. So just a real quick, this really truly, honestly, is a team effort. It's about mission partners. You can see a list of them: Socorro, Shell, University of South Florida, the Younger Bentlinson Foundation, Florida Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, University of Georgia, the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography, MOTE. They're all part of this. Their contributions could be in kind, their contributions can be funding. And then also gliders, and that U.S. Navy has been a big provider of gliders this year, participating in this and operating the gliders from their glider operational center. National Data Buoy Center supplied a glider, USM, Texas A&M, and University of South Florida providing gliders. And at the end of the day, these operations, the operations are not easy, as anybody know. When you put these gliders in the water, things happen, and I can't say anything more than the team that's been out there from the different universities, from our partners out there in the Gulf of Mexico. University of Southern Mississippi, Kevin Martin and Dr. Howden. Kevin has been on some recovery missions. I think he spent 27 hours laying in the back of a boat to recover. Recently, he also provided some really critically, does a lot of the actual piloting of the gliders and provided some critical, that got some measuring an eddy in the Gulf of Mexico that the National Weather Service gave huge kudos to being able to collect that information. Dr. Kerry Wilden and her efforts down at Texas A&M, getting the gliders out there, and Dr. Steve DeMarco and Tony Knapp, huge efforts, as well as down at University of Southern Florida with Chad Lemke. Really, again, this is all about the actual operational component of this, getting them out. Issues come up, we have to go recover them. And when we do have to recover them, we have to reach out to our partners. That could be LUMCON, USM vessels and crew, offshore. The game fishing charters is one that's being used, I think, over at Texas A&M. Proteus Technology and Slidell here has done some deployment recoveries for us. Fugro has done some. And these are the types that when these issues come up and you have to go out there and get them, it's a quick response scenario, because the amount of time, a lot of times they have to recover these vessels or deploy one is in emergency situations, and all these folks have stood up. And the other part of it is the data management part of that. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But it really truly is a team effort that goes on, and huge kudos to the crew. And I'm not mentioning everybody here that's behind the scenes as well that makes this happen, but I just wanted to highlight some of the main players. So just a little bit of numbers. We've had a NDBC and USM has had about 20 glider dates with 109 dives, 208 profiles since you get one up and going down and coming up. And it's still out and counting. And fortunately, it was under Hurricane Sally, so got some great information there. Navy glider had 50 glider days that wounded up under Hurricane Sally or near Hurricane Sally. And Navy glider NG64 was out for 60 days near Hurricane Laura. And I'll show you some more on that in a little bit. And then NG314 was deployed on August 6th, 50 days into the mission. And again, was in the direct path of Hurricane Laura and Tropical Storm Beta. TAMU Hestoma was deployed on August 13th, 43 days into the mission and counting, and also was on the periphery of Hurricane Laura. And then USF has provided 108 glider days out. And this is a great example where we're collecting temperature and salinity from which is not the hurricane picket fence isn't the primary mission, but we are fortuitously getting the collects sent to the DAC for this effort. So it's a crazy year in the Gulf. Obviously, five storms, which is just crazy. And I think where I have to capture where Dr. Kerry Wilden in a webinar made a statement with regards to the Gulf is unique in the sense that once a tropical storm is in the Gulf, it will make landfall somewhere. So the projection and the prediction of hurricane, the path and the intensity is critical. Storm surge is a huge component of the storms that enter into the Gulf. Quite often the storm surge is really what creates the most havoc and damage to these communities as much as the intensity. But unless it truly fizzles out, it will make landfall somewhere in the Gulf. So here's just an example of Hurricane Laura, where our gliders, you can see the location of the gliders and where the hurricane was coming in and projected to come in. I think ultimately it was a Cat 4, but you can see how critical that information the gliders were. These data were definitely assimilated into that Navy HICOM model and the HWRF models with NOAA. So again, you know, it's sort of really, we need more observations, we need more gliders, but I think in a lot of our post-analysis that will be done, there'll be a lot of critical outcome of the data analysis that will show the value of these and help us to promote getting more gliders in the Gulf of Mexico next year. And you can also see where the Argo floats were as well. And just another overhead view of the glider locations. If when you see red gliders, the red gliders are the actual Slocum gliders, and then I think in blue down in the Caribbean, you'll see more sea gliders. One thing that's been going on, and it's been mentioned, is the amount of development. I would have to say Gandalf grew up quite a bit over the last several months based on user requirements. Bob built in a 3D viewer, both for the Argo data and for the glider data as it's out there for analysis purpose. And as Catherine Edwards said, it's been a game changer to be able to have that tool out there and be able to look at the data and do some analysis on that real time as the systems are out there. Again, for the first time ever there, Bob was tracking 18 gliders in the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, and Southeast Atlantic. This has become really a tool that is just so well used and well recognized by the community. And here's just a quick snapshot this morning, taken about 11:04 this morning. We're still out there collecting data. The hurricane season has seemed to calm down a little bit, but I think, as mentioned, there was something coming off the Yucatan Peninsula this morning, so it's not over. As we know, it can go well into November. But the systems are out there. Where you see the flags over where you locate those are waypoints that the gliders are working towards. And again, for any of the information that you can go to Gandalf and you can get the 2D, 3D plots. And hopefully I didn't go through this too fast in the interest of time, but if there's any questions, please ask. One thing I just have to take time for the advertisement, the Oceans 2020 kicks off next week virtually. A lot of the speakers today that you heard from are on the panels. Please participate, and hopefully we'll get some good participation in there, but some really good panels, live virtual next week. Admiral Gallaudet will be talking quite a bit, doing keynote. Barb is on a panel with Dr. Larry McKinney on resilience. We have Kelly Nee and Ben Williams from FUGRO as part of the Operational Oceanography panel with Captain Wallace from the Naval Oceanographic Office. So with that, I'll finish my brief.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions? I've got one for you, Bill. I'm reading recently that the problem with intensity forecasts is that the water column heat content is not being adequately assimilated into the models. I'm not sure how true that is, but that's what I've been reading and hearing. How much involvement are you all having with Hurricane Center and the Hurricane Research Division?
So I would say one of the things, as part of going back up to the steering committee, we included Jan Suk for the modeling part of this, but Navy is definitely the HICOM models. I actually would go back to Dr. Jacobs and make sure that all the glider data was being assimilated into the models. Scott Glenn up at Rutgers has been very active in coordinating with the NOAA folks and their modeling efforts there to show, you know, to basically help coordinate getting that data assimilated. Right now, they're, and I don't know if somebody, I don't want to speak to their models because I'm not an expert on their models, but they do have a R&D version of the model running today that is assimilating the glider data to improve. Now, the question, of course, will be, you know, what's the spatial density that you need of gliders to really influence that model enough. And we've had some great luck where the gliders were right where the hurricanes went, but you know, literally that's when you have few gliders, you know, that's sort of a crap shot a lot of times. You hope to get near there, but and then like Hui, what they do is constantly put a sustained ops monitoring the boundaries of the loop current and where those boundaries are as part of a sustained effort. They'll put the gliders out for a year as opposed just for that hurricane season to continue to monitor those boundaries. But if anybody's on that can expand on the NOAA side, I'd more than, you know, please speak up now. But so just FYI, I mean, they are like Gustavo, Goni, and they're working very closely with NWS and the Hurricane Center. There's an effort going on to show the value of the gliders to the models, as well as there's an effort with the models on how well they, you know, to assimilate that and how much it improves the models. So hopefully there'll be some outcomes and metrics on that soon.
Yeah, and this is Barb. I'll just pipe in. Joe, I think it's a building collaboration. You know, we're not there totally yet, but on the Tuesday call, Bill or Stephen, do you remember? I think it was Scott who said something about National Weather Service asking for glider data or something like that. And it was the first time. Yeah, do you remember that they were reaching out instead of us like pushing to them?
They're very impressed with the EDDI work that Kevin did, and they reached out and were very appreciative of that data in their analysis that they were doing. So that's what came up there, which was like Scott said, that came from them by us going to them. So that was huge. Yep.
Well, I think they need it. I mean, the track for Sally started out west of Lake Pontchartrain and ended up over east of Mobile Bay. They have some real problems down there.
Yeah, that was huge, and that happened really fast. You're right.
Chad, did you want to add something?
Yeah, actually. Did you ask me? I'm sorry.
I did. I saw you came off mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think as an operator, one of the things that the feedback loop we've been struggling with a little bit. I think one of the things that I would like to know occasionally is getting a little bit of a feedback loop going between NOAA and the operators. This is a new process, so this is difficult. So, but Catherine Edwards and I and Carrie and I, we have all talked about this a little bit, and I think you're getting that feedback loop going a little bit more smooth would be helpful at some point. There's no big rush on it. I mean, obviously we're at the end of this year, so but I think in the off season, that's something we should do. And then, as you guys mentioned, focusing on how I know there's been some discussions of some Aussies about trying to understand exactly where we want to put the gliders for certain things. So I think some of that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, I hope, and part of the collaboration tool that we'll see that through the website. We're hopefully being able to create a website that's functional that really helps that dialogue happen, Chad. And then as we stand this up, we'll get users' feedback on how to improve that so that it's better. It will include best practices. It will include missions that are coming up in the near future, and so anybody could go there and see what is going on in the community. But the key is to get the people to join. I think Pat, you had something.
I was going to follow up a little bit. Yeah, this is a complicated feedback problem. I agree with you, Chad. The Navy models you mentioned, they're not used for hurricane intensity and tracking forecasts. They're not designed for that. They're just not used for that. I mean, they do assimilate the gliders, which is good, but it's not for that. It comes down to an initialization problem for NOAA. And so, they make a 48-hour, a 36-hour, a 24-hour, whatever it is forecast. And really, the reason Sally was so hard to predict, especially the track, is that they just didn't have a good initial state whenever they started those forecasts, those ensemble forecasts. And so I really think if you can think about the future and your future deployments, you really want to start thinking about it in terms of that initialization problem.
Getting it right, and that's one thing that, as then LaCour will emphasize as we're trying to make this more sustainable and get it into more of a funded program, is the key to this is getting the systems out there and getting the ocean right well ahead of the storms and not chasing, essentially chasing storms. That doesn't work. The gliders aren't fast enough, number one, and it doesn't add as much value. So, but then we also have to understand, how many gliders do we need to actually do that, and what's the sort of the spatial component of those gliders, and where do you put them? So.
Yeah, I think the idea behind the picket lines was that you try to cover areas where gliders or storms are going to come across before they hit the coast throughout the hurricane season, so you keep the models closer to the reality, because you can't steer your glider later towards the storm. So, and I think it's important to point out that before NOAA started funding this, Shell has been funding this work for a while, and through that project got the NOAA, the NAVO DAC or GOC set up with, worked with Maricruz to get them set up with the glider DAC so that they could easily send their data to the DAC to get on the GTS into into the models.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point.
But I think for intensity, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So my computer's been cutting out. I don't know if it's been said already, but I came in where you were saying about coverage for hurricane trajectory, but it's also about taking a page of what Scott Glenn has been saying about the essential ocean features of the Gulf of Mexico. So it really has been we have to balance, right? So with the gliders that we have available, trying to give data within the features like the eddy ahead of Sally, but also being able to provide coverage for trajectory over the storms. So I don't know if that had been said, but just wanted to add that too.
No, thank you. Yeah, definitely the effort of tracking features, I think, is Scott's been bringing that up a lot in the biweeklies, and it kind of gives you a good target, I guess, for the gliders, but as well as you want to sort of covered the other areas, you know, just to get the stratification and whatnot in the areas. So yeah, it's a challenge, you know it, right? So yeah.
Bill, you know, think about this problem is, you know, looking in retrospect, what could have been done differently to try to sample the ocean to get a better handle on Sally? And the answer isn't clear, at least not to me. That's a really hard problem. I mean, what if you deployed a picket line over by Florida or over by Texas?
Right.
And could have you gotten the gliders over to Louisiana or you know? And so it's not an easy problem. You know, at least in this case, it wasn't an easy problem at all. So a lot of work.
No, and I think Pat, you're exactly right, and I think that's something that we need to do this off season is take a look. You know, USM and TAMU and USF and MOAT, you know, in the Gulf, and then Skidaway and Rutgers on the East Coast. You know, we always operate where it's easiest for us a little bit. You know, for obvious reasons, because we have cost concerns and whatnot. But like you look at the Panhandle, we got nothing up there. You know, so how do we do that between me and Steven? Maybe getting a little bit better coverage in the Panhandle down to where I'm at. You know, those are kind of, and is that important? And that's where, you know, how much effort do we want to put into those kinds of things? And that's a little bit of a sciencey question that I think we need a little guidance from the hurricane predictors about where, you know, where our coverage, you know, the other area we don't do very well is the Florida Straits. You know, we've been talking about it for a long time in Socorro and GCOOS, but you know, can we do something down around the bend there? And is that important? We're not going to do it if it's not important. So anyways, I'd like those things at some point to get somewhere on a list of things that need to be discussed. I hope I'm not overstepping.
No, not at all, not at all. And Carrie,
the only other thing I'm going to add, Bill, from a non-modeling point of view, is that NOAA is standing up a unmanned systems effort. You know, it's part of their transformational technologies. One of their transformational technologies that they're standing up, and I think that'll be a tremendous resource to add to your, you know, to add to the ones that you already have coming up within the next year for the next season, I think.
Yeah,
and they're standing up a building in Gulfport. Yeah, so.
You know, one thing that the community, the user community, you know, there's that, but you want to be able to you know, to be able to, when these issues come up, have in your back pocket, you know, what it is that you think you need, because as they start building programs out of these, you know, Ben and I have talked about this, you need to sort of have the problem a little bounded on what you think you need, so that and also be able to provide the, you know, the value added on the user end. And in this case, it's, you know, it's intense model. I mean, hurricane intensity forecasts. So you know, we definitely want to be able to have that in our back pocket as NOAA moves forward, because yeah, I'm looking at you, that's pushing this very, very hard. There's something else I was going to say about that, but yeah, anyhow, Carrie, I popped this slide back up that, you know, it is about the you know, the vertical features as well as these specific ocean features that we have to measure. Yeah, and we're hoping with the one outcome of the user group thing that we're talking about is being able to develop a good story to be able to supply, I guess, you know, back pocket stories, you know, that people, if they go up to the hill to argue for something, you know, because when you talk to people on the hill, you're not talking to scientists, you're talking to budget weenies, but you have to be able to say what the end users are getting out of this as well as we try and build programs around the gliders and other observation systems as well. So it's not just gliders.
I have a question for the group. This is Nan Walker. Does anybody know who the main modelers are that are doing the hurricane intensity modeling in the Northwestern Atlantic, including the Gulf? Nick Shea left, he might know, but I'm
Now the group at the National at the Hurricane Research Division that is under the Hurricane Center are the guys that primarily, in my experience, are doing that modeling. They're underfunded, they're undermanned, they're under everything, and it's a shame because this season is showing, you know, how. And I'm going to get on my soapbox, living on the Gulf, and watching these things barrel into the Gulf. They really have to get some money, get some funding, and it's not just buying bigger and faster computers. They got some real assimilation issues to deal with. Then it's a multi-dimensional problem, as we all know. Sally was a good example. Not only was Sally going over, well, it missed the loop current basically, thankfully, but then it slowed down, and that wasn't forecast at all. And then as it slowed down, the ridge eroded, and that's what helped the track veer up to the northeast. But those guys, I have the guy's name in my head. Mark DiMaria, I think, is the lead guy down at HRD, and he's the guy that, you know, he's the go-to guy, you know, with issues, with questions, and should be in the loop as far as, you know, planning or, you know, as you say, getting the ocean right.
So it occurred to me that regardless of where the gliders were in the Gulf, if they could obtain a before and an after wherever they are, that's going to be valuable to the intensity forecasters because they need all that validation data. But it has to be like in the same place as close as possible. And I don't know enough about gliders to know how possible that is. But that would be, it seems to me, even though I'm not a modeler, that's what they need is before and after, because no matter where you are, that would be valuable information. So.
Yeah, Cheryl, I just wanted to follow up on just one thing real quick. You know, it depends if you're talking about R&D or operational models. Well, you know, those of us who live on the Gulf, we turn on our TV channel and we see two major products. We either see NOAA's GFS, Global Forecast System, or we see the UK Met Office. They always say, well, here's the European model, and here's the Viper, or the local, or the GFS model, or whatever your local TV station, you know, buys into. They usually show both of them. They usually say, well, the European model is just a little bit better. They usually have a little bit better handle on the precipitation and on the landfall. And so those are the operational models. You know, the cutting edge R&D, I think, is happening at NOAS and at the Hurricane Center and at places like Rutgers and a few other places. But there's a real distinction between, you know, what's operationally being used to predict these intensities and landfalls versus the R&D that's going on and all the issues that you talked about, like assimilation and, you know, where the observations are deployed and optimal deployment strategies and things like that.
There were several this year. I think maybe Laura was one. I can't remember, but you know, where the intensity was predicted very well. But then I think I can't remember if it was Sally. I know Scott Glenn reported on this that the intensity variability across the models was as much as 50 knots. So it is so different from storm to storm.
The intensity of Laura was very poorly predicted. The track was very well predicted. And the curious thing to me, because I was looking at the Gulf current, is it spent a little time over the loop current, which was very far east in the Gulf. It spent a little time over a large cyclonic eddy that should have decreased its intensity. And then it went for a very long track over the northwestern Gulf over no big feature at all. And it intensified dramatically. So the atmosphere, I think, was a driving force.
The bigger influence. Yeah, I think, yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's scary. If you see it going over an ocean warm eddy or the loop current, you expect it to intensify. But if you don't, and it does, that's really scary. because, well, I don't have all that atmospheric data. Presumably the National Hurricane Center has atmospheric data since that's their specialty. So one would think that maybe the intensity forecast should have been a little bit better, but it's, if they don't have modelers doing it, and Nick Shea told me in an email that they're not really doing a lot with the models. They're using a statistical model still, is what he told me. So that's kind of scary because I have been doing that for 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I think
apparently it's the director, you know, the director steers them one way or the other of the National Hurricane Center. I don't know a lot about it, but I'm interested.
Well, and I think another strong message that we all can remember to message to people who are working on this. Again, Carrie said it, I know, in her webinar, that if a tropical storm comes into the Gulf, it's going to make landfall. And that's different from storms that go up the East Coast that half the time, you know, they go out to sea and nobody worries about them. So this is a huge issue to us that I think we need to constantly message to people.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we've never had a storm in the Gulf, I don't think ever, that turned around and went out of the Gulf. Maybe one
or two fizzled out. Maybe one or two fizzled out, but that's about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, right.
But beyond that, you're right. I mean, they're gonna make landfall, and that's why I emphasize that point that Kerry made in her webinar. It's so true. I mean, and there's so many other, because of the shape of the coastline, you know, the storm was quite to the west. I think it was both Laura and, but you know, Joe, the impacts here in Mississippi were huge, you know, as far as the water buildup and the storm surge, because of the whole geomorphology, the shape of the land, and how no matter which way the wind's blowing, somewhere it's going to build up, no matter how far you are. So storm surge is another huge component of this as well.
Yeah, the worst storm surge we've had at where I live in Mandeville is from Beta.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is pretty far away.
Yeah, and not necessarily that big of a storm, right? But it was slow, it was constant, and there was an onshore, you know, southeast just building. And I saw, yeah, here in Diamond Head, it was crazy. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions for Bill? If not, what I would propose, but promised Jan that we'd give him a question and answer time, but we're an hour over right now. And I'd like to suggest that if you have a question for Jan or his panel, that you get to them through either Jen or to Jan directly, and then he can get back to you with his answers. Is that okay, Jan? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. Okay, Barb, anything to wrap up?
Yes, so 2 things. Board members, Jen is going to be sending out a link for tomorrow's GoToMeeting now, or in the next few minutes. She wanted to wait and do it so that it's easy for you to find in your inbox instead of sending it yesterday, which means, you know, 4 pages of inbox later. And then the second thing is, if you have specific topics that either have just been on your mind or were generated by discussion today, if you would just pop Joe and I an email either tonight or tomorrow morning so that we can kind of organize agenda for tomorrow. The agenda for tomorrow, really, Philip Hoffman, we invited him to talk about C-Note. Irony is he has a C-Note meeting that is pulling him away, as well as Bill is not going to be able to join us tomorrow because he's pulled away for the same meeting. So I've asked Philip to join us instead at our December board call. So it will basically be any topics you all want to discuss as a board, things you heard today. And then Krista Manello is going to talk to you about what she's done regarding stakeholder engagement and how we're crafting things for the next 5-year proposal and getting your feedback on that. And that's really the agenda for tomorrow. So hopefully we can stay a little bit more on time.
Hey, Barb, thanks. Any last minute thoughts, comments from anyone?
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, now here we go. Robert's rules. I need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
A second.
Man, Bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, folks. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks a lot for your participation and all that you're doing out there. I really appreciate it.